About a decade ago, a group of wingnut fiscal conservatives launched a furious crusade to slash taxes, repeal Obamacare, and balance the national budget. They, of course, called themselves the Tea Party movement, quickly found financial backing from the libertarian Koch brothers, and eventually secured enough seats in Congress to form the hard right Tea Party caucus. Now, especially given that this group also had a penchant for racist protest signs and anti immigrant fear mongering, the Tea Party immediately became the bane of Democrats everywhere. They also quickly attracted the scorn and ridicule of the liberal media. Here's one interview with Tea Partiers captured by a documentary group called New Left Media in 2010 that went viral as an example of how misinformed these ideologues were.
What specific issues do you consider to be what's going to destroy life in America?
Well, I believe unfair taxation is one of them.
Yeah.
The redistribution of wealth is another one.
And you think that's been happening under Obama's administration?
Absolutely, man. Full force.
Did you know that he's lowered taxes for 95% of working Americans?
That was when he first got into office, and you're talking a matter of $15 a week for someone, and beyond that, all the other onerous taxes getting shoved under the rug that we're not seeing.
They've actually lowered taxes for 95% of working Americans?
I would say that would be false. That would be false. I mean, now they're talking about a VAT tax.
You just don't believe it?
No.
There were $300 billion in tax credits given out to middle-class families by the Obama administration in this Congress with the Making Work Pay Credit, $400 for an individual, $800 for a couple. Where's who at?
Where's those middle-class families at? I don't see those middle-class families. I'm a middle-class family. I didn't receive a tax credit or a tax cut. I have to go to work every day hard to work to get the money to pay my light bill, to pay my water bill, to pay my house payment.
If you didn't fill out for that tax cut in your IRS paperwork, they will go ahead and adjust it and send that back to you.
I think you're misinformed.
Hogwash.
You just don't believe that?
No, that's absolutely
Is
not
a tax credit a tax cut?
I'm sorry?
You were saying it was a tax credit, right?
Yes.
That's different than a tax cut.
No.
No what?
Anybody that believes that is not really paying attention. And ultimately, we should all be paying up our own fair share of the taxes because we all live in this country.
When you hose the rich, you hurt America. Because I've never worked for a poor person. The gentleman I work for now is a wealthy individual. He wasn't always wealthy, but he built his business up and is now a millionaire. God bless America.
If we have people making billions upon billions of dollars, you think they should pay more, though, right? You certainly.
No, I don't. They have the right to earn that money. Nobody has the right to take it away from them.
So you don't think that billionaires should pay more taxes than you?
No, I don't. I think it should be a flat rate.
Do you struggle financially at all, ever, or do you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I struggle to make my house payment every month.
What sort of policies do you want to see changed?
Well, to abolish the federal income tax, to repeal the health care bill, and end the Fed, stop spending, get rid of some agencies that we don't need.
So, as misguided as they may have been, there was one way in which the Tea Party was arguably the proverbial stopped clock. The truth is that America's tax system often does screw over working people. First and foremost, I'm sure no one needs to be reminded that the US makes it extremely cumbersome for its citizens to file and pay taxes every year.
Filing taxes seems almost painful by design here in the US.
If you look at the many, many lines on the tax code, the just plethora of forms and additional attachments that you may have to make, it's an incredibly complicated code. It's over 7 million words long.
The IRS estimates the average taxpayer spends 12 hours working on it and ends up paying an average of $230 to get their paperwork filed.
Your tax return, is in no way that simple. I don't care who you are or what economic situation you're in.
Now, for some of us, it is the largest single financial transaction that we make each and every year. Just take my case. I work for a company that's based in New Jersey, but I live in New York and in Manhattan specifically. So I have to pay federal income tax, state income tax for both New Jersey and New York, plus the city income tax for Manhattan. That is a whole lot of paperwork.
In fact, the tax system is so confusing that, as we all know, it spawned an entire tax preparation industry that's now committed to keeping the process of filing taxes as difficult and opaque as possible, so of course they can rake in more money. In 2003, for instance, tax prep companies like TurboTax and H&R Block lobbied hard to kill a plan by the federal government to create a government-run free filing option for lower-income Americans. The tax companies promised that they would create their own free filing options instead, and they did. But in 2019, ProPublica found that TurboTax and H&R Block were actually actively suppressing their free file options in Google's search results. To further underscore how ridiculous this entire system is, we only have to look at how other countries handle taxes. As sociologist Monica Prasad pointed out in The Atlantic last year, in the Netherlands, the procedure is simple. First, you look over the form the government sends you with your taxes already calculated and you check it. Second, you sign it and send it back. Third, well, there is no third. That's the entire process. Dutch citizens can file their taxes in minutes. This is the case in country after country. In Japan, Sweden, Estonia, and Great Britain, people don't have to file their taxes. They're spared the high-stress homework assignment that Americans face every year. And in fact, this wildly complicated tax system in the US is not an accident. Prasad also writes, in the United States, filing taxes is painful by design. The tax collection system as we know it is the outcome of three forces: corporate lobbying, a stubborn resistance to borrowing good ideas from other Western nations, and the Republican Party's decades-long campaign against taxation itself. Now, on top of all of that, there's yet another reason why taxes in America are unfair to working people. It's the simple fact that, for decades, the rich have not paid their fair share in taxes at great expense to the rest of the country. Last year, the Rand Corporation estimated that decades of trickle-down fiscal policy, including tax cuts for the rich and financial deregulation, had essentially redistributed a staggering $50 trillion from the bottom 90% of Americans to the top 1% between 1975 and 2018. As a result, today, the rich often pay a much lower tax rate compared to many middle-class families. Just earlier this year, White House economists found that the 400 wealthiest families in the US paid an average income tax rate of just 8.2% from 2010 to 2018. According to an analysis by the Center for American Progress, that's actually a lower tax rate than the one paid by a single first-year teacher, a couple that earns a median wage and rents their home, or a typical working family with 2 children. So yes, our country's system of taxation is incredibly broken, if not necessarily in the same way that the Tea Party thinks it is. The worst thing is that neither major political party has been willing to fight for fair tax policy. Of course, it won't surprise anyone that the Republicans have continued to advocate for lower taxes on the rich, including pushing through Trump's historically unpopular 2017 tax cuts. But lately, the Democrats also seem to be working overtime to appease the rich by lowering their taxes, even though taxing the wealthy is broadly popular among the American public. As David Sirota recently wrote, as millions of voters are being crushed by healthcare costs and higher energy prices, and as Democratic lawmakers have abandoned a $15 minimum wage, Democratic leaders are pushing a regressive proposal to allow wealthy property owners to deduct more of their state and local taxes, or SALT, from their federal taxes. That's right, Democrats in Congress want to enact a tax break that would cost $475 billion and give the richest 5% $400 billion in total tax cuts. As Bernie Sanders' office pointed out last month, if this plan actually went through, it would effectively allow the top 1% of income earners to pay lower taxes than they did even after the Trump tax cut of 2017. The irony of all of this is that despite politicians' best efforts to cut taxes for the rich and simultaneously turn Americans against the idea of taxation, is that surveys have consistently found that over 90% of Americans still view taxpaying as a civic duty. Now, as we all well know, the right has often successfully used this fact to direct a degree of middle-class anger over taxes downward at supposed freeloaders like welfare recipients or immigrants. Because of this resentment, some on the left have argued for retiring the term taxpayer. Earlier this year, in an article titled "The Racist History of the Word Taxpayer and Why You Should Stop Saying It," Jeremy Moeller wrote that when people across the political spectrum invoke the concept of the taxpayer, quote, what they're really saying is that the richer you are, the more voice you should have in how the government spends money. If you're poor, especially if you're Black or brown, well then, shut up and work harder. Now, there's no doubt that some conservatives genuinely do feel this way. But what if, in this era of ongoing tax breaks for the wealthy, corporations that pay no taxes whatsoever, and rampant tax offshoring, we reclaim the idea of the taxpayer in order to fight for soaking the rich? After all, it's our work that makes the wealth, and it's our taxes that currently subsidize corporate welfare. To put it another way, the truth is that there are freeloaders in our system who continue to sponge off of everyone who pays taxes. But of course, what the Tea Partiers never quite realized is that the freeloaders aren't at the bottom, they're the ones at the very top. Ariel, are you ready for tax season?
God, no. Hearing the simplicity of other systems makes my heart sink. Yeah. But then I also am like, if that happened here, people would be extremely suspicious of why, right?
Right.
If the government sent you like a bill saying this is what you need to pay, check a box if that's right. Oh man, I don't think that'd go over. We have a long way to go. I think we need to restore some faith in the system, and another way of doing that is taxing the rich.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it comes back to a theme that I think, especially you and I talk about a lot on the show, which is that there's a kind of snowball effect of lack of trust in the government and our institutions. And the government itself, as we have talked about many times, is often the one that is actively undermining people's trust in themselves, right? In the institution of government itself. And, something else we've talked about on the show before is this idea, I believe the political scientist Suzanne Mettler calls it the submerged state. And that's the idea that, the government is helping people, but the way that the US government does it in particular is invisible by design, right? So going back to the video of the Tea Partiers who are saying things like, well, I didn't get any tax cut. Like, I'm middle class. I didn't get any Obama tax cut. They could be right. Or, it actually makes sense that they wouldn't know that they had received a tax cut because the way that the tax system
I think it got lost in that 12-hour process.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I also think that, tax code in this country is so complicated because we've wrapped up so many other benefits that are either universal or easily available through another system into our tax code. So your health benefits are now in your tax code. You can deduct childcare and dependent benefits or costs in your tax filing. And it leaves people to be kind of, making decisions that honestly, it took a team of hundreds, if not thousands of people who are experts in their field to figure out how to wrap that up into our tax code. And then you as an individual are supposed to jump into that and be like, what's my marginal tax benefit if I had a dependent care FSA last year and then spent an additional $4,000 on childcare? Like the fact that we are leaving this down to individuals when we have experts create it, and that's on every stage, including the lobbyists, on every level of intervention into tax code. The fact that normal people are then supposed to jump into that and be expected to have any bearing within that is unbelievable. It's unbelievably unfair, and it's unfair on purpose.
Yeah. And I, just to underscore all of that, again, something that we've talked about on the show before is like, the longer that the system continues, the harder it is to undo it. Now we have this entire massive tax preparation industry, which actually has a lot of lobbying power. And of course, they don't want the complicated system to go away, as I was saying during my segment, because they actually make a lot of money off of it, it's really difficult to undo. I'm not really even sure how we go about doing it. But I guess just to kind of wrap up, like I have very mixed feelings. I mean, maybe that was clear, but it's like, the tax system is unfair. And, on the one hand, like, I really do want to acknowledge that. Like, I hate filing taxes just like everybody else. I actually do believe that, in many ways, working people and middle-class people are getting screwed over by taxes. Not necessarily because they're being taxed too much, but when you think about, the fact that wages have been stagnant for decades, the fact that we have rising costs of living, and also the rich are not paying their fair share, like the middle class really is, or, the working and middle class are subsidizing the rich. And that's just like completely insane.
Yeah, and everything that our tax money pays into is being fought on the other end, right? So it's complicated at like the point of funding, which is our tax money, and then it's essentially impossible, right, to see the return in a clear, uncomplicated way, except when it comes to the military, but only if you're not a veteran.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, like, that's the other thing. Like, I believe that, like, obviously everybody, regardless of how much taxes they pay, should have some say in our government. But at the same time, when you are, working family or whatever, and you're paying taxes, like, sometimes it's like, what am I getting in return? Like, all of our social safety net programs are like totally broken. They all are like means tested to death or come with, work requirements. You're going to talk about that a little bit later. And so it's actually really, it makes sense to me why there's a lot of resentment toward the idea of taxes. Now, that said, I do want to, point out again that lots of Americans, the majority of Americans, think that the rich should pay more. They want to tax corporations more heavily, and they believe that people should pay taxes. Like, despite all of this, I think Americans on the whole are still like, yeah, we need to pay taxes. So, it's kind of like, I don't know, what do we do about it? That's always the question, I guess.
Yeah, how do we fix the U.S.
right
tax
here on the
system
show
in 10 minutes or less?
Right.
Yeah, no, I think it starts with, declaring what exactly and specifically is unfair about it. And the first thing is that the rich are basically not taxed at all.
Right. Exactly.
And that has to be our starting point. And then it needs to be, an accessible interface for the government to actually collect that money without it being, one, unfair, and two, insanely and bizarrely complicated. And I think that means disentangling some of those benefits that are paid for through kind of what I'll refer to as the employer welfare state, right?
Yeah.
Employer guaranteed benefits, and making those public and universal programs.
Yep.
It's easy peasy.
You fixed it. If you like this video from The Jacobin Show, please hit like and subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks.